everybody. Welcome to my class. I would like to first do an acknowledgement of country, which is I would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people who are the traditional custodians of the land that I am on. I acknowledge their continuing connection to land, waters and community. I pay my respects to the people, the cultures and the elders past and present. During this class, we're going to have two different question and answer sessions. If we do run out of time, or if you have questions later, or if you aren't comfortable asking in front of other people, please feel free to email me at ígulfríðr@gmail.com and I will put that in the chat window shortly. But it will also be a couple of times throughout the slides. And I suppose from here we'll get started. Firstly, we're going to have a little run through on what's going to be happening today. Firstly, I will outline what Sprang is, who I am, how I got started doing Sprang, looking at the different techniques that can be used within Sprang. This should allow for a better understanding and identification of the later images of the extant items. Then we'll have a question time to make sure everybody has a basic understanding of what's going on, and then we'll examine the historical examples.
What's that?
The link to the, if you want to watch the, I've sent it to you on Gmail.
Then I will discuss some of the challenges in researching a fairly obscure and largely extinct fibercraft, which is part of why this talk and our knowledge generally is so incomplete. We'll look at a variety of different examples from different locations and times. Due to the inconsistency in the treatment of these items, the types of testing undertaken and how old some of them are, the estimated creation dates can be quite broad, often several hundred years apart. After seeing those, we'll go into our second question time, and the length of that will depend on how much time we've got left. Then when people are ready, I've also got, and if we have enough time, I've also got some out of period examples and some theorized items that I've kept separate because they are theorized. Then I have a select bibliography that I'll show at the end. I'm also happy to provide a more comprehensive vocabulary. Please feel free to contact me again at ígulfríðr@gmail.com, and then I can send it to you. This bigger bibliography will include the names of pattern books, how to learn how to do Sprang books, links to articles, websites, YouTube videos, some Sprang worksheets from Carol James. And yeah, we'll sort of go from there. For my disclaimer, I'm new to teaching. This is my first time ever teaching anything online. It is mildly terrifying. Some of the information included has been found in older sources due to the nature of Sprang. I've tried to update locations and terminology where I've noticed the need for it, but I may have missed things. I do apologise for that, and if you see something that needs changing or updating, please let me know. Preferably via email, because I'll probably forget it if we do it in here. Or chat. Okay. First thing, what is Sprang? Sprang is a reciprocal braiding technique that creates, that's just brought a finger across, apologies. So, is a reciprocal braiding technique that creates a stretchy fabric that is a warp-only textile. So traditionally woven fabric has both a warp, which are threads traveling the length of the fabric, and a weft that travel across. Sprang is a reciprocal braiding technique. So when you create one row, you create a second row for no extra effort. That is exact mirror image of the first row. That is because you've got the threads attached to both the bottom and the top of the frame, which mean that when you twist in one direction, it has to twist back in order to continue working. You can see in the image on the slideshow, as you go, sort of you do one twist and then the twist appears at the bottom. So that means you're working from the outer edges in towards the center. So using your fingers or a needle, you use pairs of threads, generally a thread from the front of the fabric stick and a neighboring thread from the back of the stick, which you twist to create your fabric. To create fabric, rather than a bunch of disconnected twisted threads, you need to offset your rows on specific rows. And in its simplest form, that's every second row. If you think of a three-strand braid when you're plaiting your hair or something like that, if you don't release it down the bottom, you end up with a tangled mess. By attaching to both the top and the bottom, and then making sure we work it down to the bottom every row, we actually utilize that twist to halve the amount of time that it takes to create a fabric. What is Sprang? Continuing on. When you're finished, as some of you may have considered, if you're working towards the middle, what happens when you get there? You need to find a way of securing it or it will untwist. There are various ways of doing that. In the image here, you can see it's just been chained across, one loop through the other. And then when you get to the very end, you can either tie that to itself, or you can use another thread and use it to sew it together, or however you want to, but you have to secure it along. You can also insert a single weft thread or a cord if you want a nice stable bottom, but there are a lot of different choices of how you can do it. Having this meeting line and the fact that you create exact mirror images is one of the ways that you can identify Sprang in textile items, because it's the only form of textile that results in this middle line. And it means if you make an error on one side, you can see it reflected in the other side, which can make identifying it significantly easier for those who are hoping to study it or replicate it. When creating Sprang, we work a variety of different stitches, and these can be worked either S-wise or Z-wise. So this image here shows if you twist in one direction, you can see the threads that are on the top, which are in the darker green, are moving in a direction that is the slant on the Z. And if they're moving in the other direction, then they're considered to be S twists. This is relevant later because some stitches utilize both S and Z twists to create different textures within the fabric. All that is required to start with Sprang is some yarn or string, 2 sticks, some fingers or a needle, and a reliable method of adjusting and maintaining suitable tension. The earliest fragment of Sprang that we're aware of is a plant fibre fragment found in Eton Woodgate in the UK from approximately 3500 BC. I have not found a great photo of that. The earliest piece recognised as an item is the Borum Eshoy wool cap from around 1350 BCE. There have also been various artworks and physical examples of Sprang found throughout the world from then until the present day. We do have large gaps in our knowledge and examples due to the fragile nature of textiles. Most older examples are found in areas of extremes such as cold or heat, deserts, bogs, and occasionally oak coffins. Sprang appears to be a technique of convergent evolution that is developed independently in various locations and timeframes with no known crossover or transfer of knowledge. So places like Egypt, Peru, and Denmark have the most and best preserved examples. But this is a textile technique that spans thousands of years. How do we know what sort of techniques were used in which area and when, and what types of items have been found? And is there even a difference? So, brief intro there. Who am I? My name's Ígulfríðr. Hi, everyone. I'm from Pillet in Polydicopoulos in Lockhart, and I've been discovering Sprang for about 18 months. I have a lot to learn still. There is a lot more to learn about Sprang than I'd ever realised, and it's been a lot of fun, but yeah, there's so much more out there, but also really, really hard to source sometimes. My email address, again, everybody, is ígulfríðr@gmail.com. Please contact me if you want information on any of the images, although please note the slide number. This is a really image-heavy slideshow. And if you just say, oh, that picture of that hat, I'm going to be completely lost. But I do have information about where I sourced all of these images from and further information about them. If you'd like to get a more comprehensive copy of my bibliography, or if you'd like to provide some feedback, please also email me. So, how did I get started? Initially, I saw this cap, which I thought was really cool. on Sally Pointer's Heritage Education website. It was done in a technique that I hadn't seen before, and I was completely fascinated with it. I contacted her to ask her for some further info, and it's kind of gone from there. I had a few challenges, having a bit of a false start. I couldn't get my hands to do the thing, like muscle memory sort of things, and I ended up putting it aside for a little bit. And then we had our in-person collegium event, which was a gilded symposium. And I attended a face-to-face class with Mistress Rohis Fairhurst, and with her help, it suddenly clicked, and I've been exploring it since then, going, learning from books, from Carol James through Zoom classes and also online sessions, some Sprang along groups, and another woman from Northern America, Sharon Wickman, I believe. So within Sprang, what we see is that there are 3 key techniques, and they each have different uses, functions, and appearances, and deciding what you use when really can make a huge impact to your finished item. So the first, which is the simplest form of Sprang, is interlinking or simple interlinking. Now they've stretched these out so that you can see more what's going on with the actual threads, but if they're relaxed, that actually holds quite tight in together. And it looks fairly similar to a chainmail sort of fence, twisting around one partner in one side, and then that thread is moving and twisting around a partner to the other side. Then we have interlacing. Now, interlacing, if you turn your head about 45 degrees, it looks just like plain weave. And that's effectively what it is. This one is a 1-1 interlacing, so over one thread, under the next. And in the Sprang technique where you put attached ends, what that means is that basically it comes down on a diagonal and then bounces off that wall and then goes across on a diagonal until it hits the next edge of the thread, edge of the fabric. Then we have intertwining. Intertwining is definitely one of the slowest techniques I've seen so far. And it's basically twisting threads directly around each other. So instead of where these were all working with pairs of threads where you crossed one thread over the other, in intertwining, you're actually crossing 2 threads around another pair of 2 threads and making them twine between each other. This means that these don't shift at all. So once you've finished them, the size of those holes will remain consistent and can work quite well for netting. Each of these different techniques have variations within the technique, so twining within interlinking, and they can be used separately or in conjunction with each other to create different looks, different stretch amounts, different uses and shaping within a single item. Sprang is generally warped up with all of the threads at once, so if you need the shape of the Sprang to change, you need to change how you work the threads. A huge variety of fabrics can be created from the same basic techniques. However, it's a time-consuming technique, meaning that most items are reasonably small, so even caps, belts, socks, etc., will take quite a long time to create. The hairnets that I made, which is one of the earliest examples you'll see, took me around 30 hours to make. And I'm not super fast, but I'm not ridiculously slow either. Following on from here, we're going to have a look at some slides that will show the ways that these techniques can be used to create fabric that's suited to your needs. It'll also show more clearly some of the structures you're going to see in the extant items, which will allow you to more effectively identify what sort of techniques have been used within different items. So, firstly, these are all types. So we showed simple interlinking, which in this green one, I don't really like simple interlinking because it's kind of boring. So I tend to do little bits of it with other stuff in between. Along this green one here, you can see this very simple section. That is simple interlinking. So it's just one thread over one thread, twisting along its another pair. So the interlinking with lace patterns is simple interlinking, but with extra holes throughout it, hopefully where I intended to put them. Let's see. Interlinking is generally worked in that Z twist that I was talking about earlier, where it's where the Z angle is on the top. This continual twisting in one direction means that once it's no longer under tension and attached to your frame, the fabric wants to twist quite severely, and you need to do things to reduce that. Most of these pictures are just some samplers where I was testing out patterns to figure out, what I wanted. This one here in red, I found an extant item. I really liked the look of it. I thought it was cool, but I wanted to learn how to recreate it. So I made a pattern for it and then made a second pattern for it and then fiddled with it and made the pattern. But this is the final example of it. And the image that I had was quite a low quality pattern picture that I was looking at. So it was a bit hard to figure out what was going on. Next, we have interlinking with twining. So this is still that simple interlinking for the background, but then we've got additional threads that we're twining. And so they're doing a bit of a different thing in that these ones are coming straight down, the other ones are going on a diagonal, and you can direct those threads to create patterns however you would like them to do that. And if with this one, I used a much thicker thread than the background. But if you use similar sized threads, you can actually hide those threads behind the rest of your fabric if you want them to disappear for a little bit. We see this sort of twining a lot in the Egyptian and the Coptic Sprang work. Then next we have some interlinking with some S and Z twists. I only have a small sample of this because I've only recently started looking into it. This is when it's unstretched but just squished flat a bit. And this is when it's pulled apart, and you can see it's still just as dense as that interlinking was. So it's not like it's got the holes that you saw with the lace, but that there's definitely patterns within it. And when it's relaxed, it creates a different texture and a bit of interest within a quite plain fabric otherwise. With these, normally with interlinking, what we see is that the top rows are Z twist interlinking and the bottom rows are S twist interlinking. With these, we're swapping back and forth using transition stitches to create some S stitches and some Z stitches, which makes a huge difference as to the texture and still maintains that structure. This one I've included in the examples because it's kind of funky, but I haven't seen it anywhere in period. It was mentioned briefly in a book that I was reading, and I thought I'd figure out how to do it. It looked really cool. It taught me some really interesting things about how to work Sprang. Basically, what you have here is interlinking, where you then worked in separate sections and then you moved those sections to a different location and attached them and then kept working them. Definitely more of an artistic technique. I haven't seen a lot of functional sort of reasons for it, but I thought it was still a bit fun. Then still within this first technique of interlinking, which is the main technique that a lot of work is done in, is double cloth. So this is 2 layers of cloth created simultaneously. And all I've done here is then brought the threads that were being worked at the back, I've brought them to the front for a period, and then back to the back, and then back to the front, and then creating the pattern within it. It's really slow. It's really fiddly. It's mostly seen in Coptic or Egyptian Sprang. And it's really rewarding, but a lot of work. I would only do small samples of it, but what you end up with is this is the same example, just front and the back. This is interlacing. So moving on to that second technique of interlacing, where you're doing the plain weave sort of fabric. These are all just examples of interlacing. They are all 1-1 interlacing, which means they're exactly the same technique. I'm doing exactly the same stitches. The only difference within any of these is the order of and the frequency of the warp threads creates the different patterns. So once you've sorted it out and ordered it correctly, you just let it run naturally and it does the patterns itself, which I think is really cool. Unlike normal intertwining, this sits very, very flat, which because you are going back and forth between Z and S stitches, for every row. And what that means is it's really good for things like belts and garters and bands and things like that. You can also do a 2-2 interlacing, which is much tighter and denser and especially good for things like garters. This can be used in conjunction with interlinking, which we also see in some hairnets. I only have one little example of intertwining. This is a little bag that, if you have a look here at the left, you can see that this is the interlinking that we talked about to begin with. Then at the very bottom is the interlacing that we've also been chatting about. In between is this intertwining that twists the pairs of threads around each other, maintaining that same partner and generally traveling in a diagonal unless you choose to make it travel differently or you accidentally make it travel differently. It's fairly hard to sort of explain the pairs around each other, but I think you can see it decently within the image. This is seen in its most complex form in Peruvian Sprang, where they did double and even quadruple intertwined Sprang, so working with 4, 6, 8, and even more threads at a time, and I don't know how they had that many hands. I agree with Peter Collingwood, and there's a few other people who've talked about it, that the pre-Columbian Peruvian people had the highest level of Sprang expertise throughout the world, from what we've seen, because they created these sorts of intertwining really complex works, but they also showed a mastery of all of the other Sprang techniques. The challenge that we have with the Peruvian Sprang, though, is that a lot of information and research relating to it is not available in English. So it's largely unknown, even by those who've heard of Sprang before. They might not know that Peruvian Sprang even exists. So this is my big simple slide to remind me to ask everybody if they would like to have questions.
So what language is the Peruvian stuff in?
Depends on who studied it.
Ah.
So sometimes it may be in Spanish, but some of the people who went and studied Sprang first were Danish. So we've got a bunch of stuff in Danish, and then we've got stuff in Dutch, and then we've got stuff in Czech and all sorts of languages, Norwegian. I've found
the Harcourt's in French.
Pardon?
Well, the Harcourt was originally in French.
The Harcourt was originally in French, so I've got that in the the English translation of that, and it's really cool. But that's where we see some of the challenges, which we'll discuss a bit later on. There are language challenges within Sprang, so not just the actual, it was written in a different language, but that the terminology wasn't standardized. And so when we look through de Harcourt, when he's talking about Sprang, he just refers to it as braiding. And as you can imagine, if you jump online and you search braiding, you're not going to get Sprang. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges within the language as well. So, but yeah, many languages. Does that cover it, or did you? Yeah. All right. Anybody else have a question? Just checking. I'm just checking to see if there's any hands up or anything in the chat which I've missed. Sorry.
Are your slides something you're willing to share with us?
Depends. I think so. The slides, like I haven't put all of the information in the slides, and I've sort of done that intentionally because I find it frustrating when I go along to workshops and online things where people are literally just reading everything off the slide, and it's like, well, I could have just read that. You could have just written an article and I would have read that. I think I'd share it. I would request that. I mean, I think
I'll never use it for any. I'm not going to like go and do your thing.
Yeah.
I want an easier way to have
remember
the information. Yeah.
Yeah.
You might need to watermark.
It'll just make a difference in how I take notes right now.
Yeah. Okay. I reckon I can, but I'd ask people to please not share it. And it may take me a little bit of time after the class to be able to share it, because I wanted to put a PDF, like turn it into a PDF, because it'll be easier to look through as a PDF anyway.
Oh, that'd be so great. Thank you.
Yeah? Okay,
Yeah.
no problems. Right, I'm just quickly scanning through the... Okay, I don't see anything else in the chat. Does anybody else have any questions, or will we move on? Cool. All right, I'll move on. Go back to trying to share this, or come back screen. Let's see if this is going to work. There we go. So why do we have gaps in and lack of knowledge? So there is a lack of documentation generally. It's fairly niche. So, and there's not a lot of examples worldwide. But we also have insufficient specificity within the documents. So quite a lot of textile documents or books will talk about looms or weaving or braiding or whatever, but it's hard to tell that they're specifically referring to Sprang in some occasions. Textiles are kind of fragile. There's not a lot of surviving examples of it. We also have quite a lot of examples that have been misidentified, either by the archaeologists themselves, or sometimes even in museums. And so when you go online looking for Sprang, you might see something and think it's Sprang, but they've identified it as knitting or nailbinding or netting or something else. We don't have a lot of continuing tradition on Sprang. So throughout the world, there are definitely places that continued doing Sprang, but it's always been, from what we can tell, a bit niche. And it often doesn't get passed down, and being really time consuming, it tends to only be people who are really interested in the craft that are doing it nowadays. We also have language barriers, which I'll go into a bit further in a later slide, and we just don't know how prevalent it was. So then we've got why there's so few period examples. Fibers break down quickly unless they're preserved. We can preserve them, like they can be preserved with desiccation or freezing or salts or oak coffin barrows, etc. But it means that finds that are hundreds or thousands of years old, there's only a few places in the world that we actually have a chance of finding anything. They also take a really long time to make. So some items I expect would have been worn out or passed down over time until they were pieces, rather than thrown away in nice, neat condition for us to find later. So why did Sprang die out? Carol James has had a bit of a discussion about the Industrial Revolution. Her theory makes sense to me, that prior to the Industrial Revolution, it seems to have been practiced in a fairly, practiced around the place. But then once we had people moving into less skilled labor into factories, there were less people learning how to create Sprang. When we think about the timing, the Boromeshoy hairnet was found in, what was it, 1870, I think. And when it was found, it was declared to be a previously unknown textile technique by the textile experts of the day. They had no idea how to do it, and they actually had to reverse engineer it. So it indicates that it became really rare during the Industrial Revolution. The labour-intensive nature of Sprang means that it would become less available and affordable really quickly, and it would likely have always been quite costly. So this means that often what we found is from higher status burials. Though it would have also been accessible to lower classes due to the simplicity of the necessary equipment. But why don't we see much from them? Probably because they passed them down and then threw them away. A lack of common terminology makes it harder to pass this knowledge on across time and borders and languages. And while it did continue in some less industrialized countries generally, where the ease of access to creating Sprang as compared to other textile forms might have allowed it to continue to be of use or interest, but for the most part, it wasn't seen that much. There are definitely some challenges to consider. I am absolutely not reading this entire slide. It is huge. This is part of the challenge that we're finding trying to research Sprang, because you can go onto websites and they can translate things, but it doesn't matter if then the English translation becomes something that is not specific enough. We're finding things like broken and leap and lace and linking. And if you search those, you're going to find a whole bunch of inaccurate results. Plenty of museums and galleries seem to have Sprang, and it's mentioned in books and articles and things, but a lot of those places don't have online collections, or they have online collections, but their word for Sprang isn't the same as ours, or it doesn't translate well on their website, or it doesn't have the right metadata on their website. Their examples are often incorrectly, well, not often, but sometimes incorrectly categorized as the knitting or the netting or the lacework. That matters because searches across languages can get unrelated results because they can get confounded with other words. And if you translate a web page or try to search another museum with the wrong term, you end up with no results, even though you know that it's got examples. Then we've also got that there are English variations, because until the 1970s, we didn't actually have a standardized word for it in English either. So, almost up to the actual items. Why do we struggle to find looms and evidence? So you can see 4 different forms. None of these forms are forms that I do Sprang in at the moment. These are all different ways of creating Sprang. This one woman is using a bent stick. There's a backstrap version. There's another one here with people with rods across between trees. And this they've called a vertical loom, but could just as easily be an artist's easel. It's really not specific. It's not particularly identifiable. Really, you need 2 sticks and a way of tensioning them. It's also not very well defined in older texts. We've then got the language barrier again, and there's no common terms known. Throughout the world, yeah, I will have to send you guys the slides if you would like them. Please email me. These are a whole lot of places that we found evidence of Sprang, and it's all across the world. And the technique itself could be done, like every technique that we see throughout this could be done everywhere else. That makes it really difficult to figure out, well, what could we wear from when? So what we need to consider then is common elements, themes, colours, techniques in historical objects, which we can finally get to. So, first item found. This is the first item found and also the oldest item. This comes from 1350 BCE in Denmark. It's an oak coffin burial. The reason that we are so precise about that date is because they actually dated it based on the tree rings on the oak coffin. This one uses some interlinking, multiple twists here, but still just that simple interlinking, and then some chaining across to create ridges, which also stabilized it. This was just made out of a undyed wool. This one is similar time frame, also from Denmark. And this one is a much, much denser fabric, but still quite simple, still just using rows. And this reconstruction here is Marguerite Hald's reconstruction, working from this. So I'm fairly impressed with what she's come up with, but there's also some flexibility on how accurate that was. There could have been other patterning within, we just don't know. The oak coffins allow for certain textiles to be quite well preserved, but they completely destroy others, which is interesting. This one, okay, these are pants. The pants are not Sprang, but the bands around the head, the waist, above the knees are all created in Sprang, but a 2-2 twill, so over 2 threads, under 2 threads, which creates quite good stretch, which holds things quite securely. The bottom bands are also braided, but done with a free end technique rather than Sprang. There's a really, really good documentary available on this called The Oldest Trousers in the World that's on YouTube. And the authors are very, very happy to send you the full, their full article. If you just send them an email, they will send it to you. It's really nice. And this is the earliest sort of thing, and the only thing that I'm currently aware of that we found in China. But I believe that the people in these burials were North Eurasians, so a different culture to the current inhabitants. Then we have a really, really big break where we have 500 odd years where we've got nothing. Not that I'm aware of anyway. We do see some clear depictions showing that it was an ongoing tradition though, because we see here, we can see a Sprang frame, which is quite identifiable by the fact that you can see a mirroring sort of, not quite full understanding of it, but you see that there is obviously patterning on both of these at the top and the bottom of the frame and unworked threads in the center. That helps us identify it as being Sprang. They also refer to these generally as portable looms. So when you're searching for things, sometimes looking for portable loom will actually net you some Sprang looms. This is another Danish hennet. This time it's a bog burial, so found in a bog and preserved there. This one's the original. This is just rows of S and Z interlinking that can create stability within it to stop it from overstretching, whereas just sticking to one will create a very, very, very stretchy thing. We can also see a cord, what they've in the middle meeting line, instead of chaining across, they've used a cord here, which is the thing that's allowed them to tension it and tie it to a person's head. It's a really interesting look, that one. This one is from Peru. This is the hugest piece of Sprang that I've ever seen. It's pieced. I can get a cursor across along here. Can you see my cursor? I think you can. So along the center on a horizontal axis, we could see that it was actually stitched together along there. And then running vertically, we can see the two meeting lines. And you can tell that that's the way it's done because these two match each other and these two match each other. This is made out of camelid wool. It is still interlinking, but it's quite complex lace interlinking. And it's these sorts of open work mantles were generally used as funerary items in Peru. This was the item that inspired Sally Pointer's Iron Age cap. So this is what they found, which they found in a dig in 1835, and they stapled it to some cardboard, and then they threw it in a drawer for 100 years and forgot about it, and then it was rediscovered. It was found to be a very, very simple pattern, repeating lattice pattern with a woven band attached to the front so that you could tension it off. They originally thought it was a kid's one, but then there was a new article that came out in 2024 that discussed it and said that they actually think it wasn't, but that instead of tying and covering the hair, it was actually more of a head wrap, so covering the head and allowing the hair to come out down the bottom. This was originally white, but the first time I wore it, I accidentally got some henna on it, and henna dyes really, really, really nicely. It dyes protein fibers, and so the wool went kind of splotchy, so now it's green. This is one of the few finds from England. This is from Nicolgate Bar in York. They are not entirely sure on the dating of this one. I don't know if they haven't done testing or that there's something that's confounded the testing or whatever, but they believe it came during the Roman occupation of York. And we can see rows of S and Z twisting, alternating in this one, possibly worn as socks, but not certain. These are some of the finds from the 1st to the 6th century in Peru. These first sort of maze-like or labyrinthy sort of ones are that intertwining that I showed you early, that quite complex one that involves 4 or more threads. And some of these are quadruple and double interlinking. So they could be using 8 or even more threads for each time they make a new stitch on this one, which is still mind-boggling to me. They really do show that they are some of the most complex techniques of any of the Sprang that I've seen. This hat over here is, it's just rows of S and Z, but sometimes multiple rows in one direction to create like an intertwining sort of, so not intertwining, interlacing sort of style, where you have a bit of an interrupted twill sort of pattern. Then we move to a stack from Egypt. So this is some of the Sprang lace that we see from Egypt. Now these are all, there's some challenges with the Egyptian finds. A lot of them haven't actually, like I haven't found detail of them, of specifically how they were found. So some of them were found in groups, like in stacks of them at once. Some of them were found individually. Some of them were found on bodies, but sometimes a person was wearing 3 or 4 hats. I don't entirely understand all of that. But it means I don't have heaps of information, but I do know which museums all of these are located in, and I have the call numbers and stuff. So if you need information, let me know, and then you can contact the museums and give them a bit of a nudge. These are all Sprang lace interlinking, varying types of complexity. Almost all of them are linen. The only one that isn't is that multicolored one or polychrome hat, but the rest of them are all made in an undyed linen. We could start to get a bit of a feel for some of the shapes that they might have used, but there's quite a bit of creative variety within these, which is nice to see. Then we have the beginning of colour work within Egypt. And one of the things that we do see quite a lot is red being quite big. They're certainly not all red, but there's quite a lot of red being used. We can see some different techniques within these bags. Now, some of them, I'm hoping that I've gotten them big enough that you may not be able to see depending on the size of your screen. Up the top here in them, they've actually shaped them by working multiple threads together, still doing an interlinking or S&Z twist or whatever, but they're pulling them in to create that shaping that they want so that they're a bit pulled in at the top. Some of them we can see the meeting lines in the first one, just along the front, just up from the center, like just up from the bottom. We can actually see, actually no, that one's not a meeting line. The meeting lines are more up top. That one is a way of tightening up the bottom loops so that they could sew the woven band onto them, so that that would be a nice neat edge. In the large areas of red, we can see some diamonds that are created. The diamond motifs are quite common across Egyptian items, diamonds and triangles. Firstly, I suspect that's because they're quite easy to create within Sprang, because it's, once you get the hang of it, it's just, you just shift it over one more and keep going. But it does create some texture in what otherwise looks like a quite plain bag. But then along here, we've got some twining so that the colours are shifting and doing interesting things, and even we've just got some stripes where they've warped up thin stripes of a different colour just to create a bit of interest throughout. In this one, which I struggle to see on mine, so you may not be able to, in between each of the large diamonds, they've actually got patterning, the S&Z patterning within those diamonds. So there's quite a lot of complexity involved in it. A lot of these we see, as I said, in the red, but the accents tend to be yellow, green, blue, and these are all made out of wool. Wool dyes much easier than linen. So, and we've been able to dye wool for a really long time.
And here's your 5-minute warning.
Oh, that's terrifying. I don't know what the rules are with regards to this. I know that there is a break after this, a half-hour break, so I don't know if they will let me go into that or not, but we'll see how we go from here. I'll try and zoom through some of these. I might see if I can stay after the session to show the theorized and out-of-period stuff for anybody who's interested.
Thank you.
So continuing on, oops, sorry, I'll go back to that one briefly. This one just shows some different techniques, and with a focus, these are actually blue, although they may look a bit black. That's a bit of time. But we see interlacing here and different bands of different techniques, which could have been a sampler or could have just been done for fun or whatever. But again, still sticking with those same basic colours of the yellows, blues, greens, and reds. Then we also see some interesting pieces. The two on the right are both turbans. I can see a raised hand. Hang on, I will, sorry. Okay. Elizabeth, you had a question?
Yes, so there's what looked like finger loop braiding on the prior image.
I'll go
The
back.
last,
Um, this one
yes.
along here.
Is that actually finger loop braiding or
I'm not certain. It could be finger loop braiding. It could be,
flying?
it's hard to tell how many threads there are, but it could have been a round, like a whip cording, like a 4-strand round braid.
Okay. Is there a type of braiding cording that is often found alongside Sprang? Or is it just anything they had on hand?
It's so far what I've seen is all sorts of things. So I've seen some what looks like whip cording. I've seen some braiding. I've seen some twisting. It seems to be whoever knew how to do what would just put what they wanted to use, if that makes sense. But yeah.
Yep.
All right. Thanks. Okay. So, back to this one. Over here we see they're Sprang lace again. But they have done very, very tight work up the top and much looser down the bottom so that they can then split it and create these turbans that you just tie on around your head by using those two crossed over each other. This one is really, really interesting. It looks like it's a tutu, and then they've added extra fringes and things. But it just looks like it would be really funky, and I want to look more into that one. Then we have in Norway, we have the table stocking. So this one is their earliest find. The thing that's most fascinating about it is that it has both top and bottom tablet weaving attached to it, which is really quite unusual. And at least one of the ends was attached, and then it was created. Like they made the tablet weaving and then created the warp for the Sprang at the same time, so that they didn't have to stitch it on afterwards. Then we have, again, more techniques within Egypt. So I will quickly zoom through those because we are pretty much out of time, unfortunately, which I'm sorry about. I misjudged.
Excuse
There
me, you
is
can
some-
stay.
There is
So I
some
can stay?
information. You can stay in the room during the break if you want to. People might wander off,
Run away.
to go and have a little break and come back, but you are certainly welcome to take up some of the break time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. If anybody would like to stay, please feel free to do so. If you don't, you're quite welcome to leave. Again, please email me if you want slides, bibliography, anything like that. Just let me know, and we can go from there. Okay. So within Egypt, we're starting to see a bit more development as we're getting a little bit later on. More complexity, more patterning, thinner yarns, more even techniques and things like that. But it's still, we still really are using exactly the same thing. It really is still the same fibre craft. There's not a lot of evolution in twisting threads that can happen except the patterning that you create in however way you choose to create it. Then into the 9th, up as far as the 9th century, we're seeing some really very detailed work. So this is some very fine linen. And in this bag that at first glance looks quite simple, the red one at the bottom, it's got some very, very complicated S&Z twists that you'd really have to sit there and map and either be very, very good at it or remember what you're doing. And then this is the end of the Egyptian Sprang. As the last piece that I have. Haven't really seen any new techniques in this one. It was just really cool. But we're now looking at 800 years of Sprang. So there's definitely some development within it in Egypt, but it really is still the same thing. And we've got a bit of an ongoing tradition going on there with something that lasted for 800 years or more. So from here, we move to one of the very, very few pieces that is in the United States. This particular item here, unlike most of the Sprang that we've seen to date, was made out of cotton, which is unsurprising given that it was in the US. This is an interlinked lace with some quite complicated motifs and work. And it was recreated by the request of the museum by Carol James so that they can put their original away out of respect for the dead, but still be able to show this amazing technique to people who come to visit. My knowledge here is really limited on this particular one, but Carol James, in the course of her reconstruction, did create an article which is available to download online through a free academia account, or just have a search for the Arizona open work shirt. Then we have one of the few European finds. This is from Austria. This is also a Sprang lace interlinked piece. It was originally created in linen. My piece is created in cotton. This was found with a lot of other textile remains under the floorboards of Lengberg Castle, where they used it as backfill. And they just pulled out stacks and stacks of fibre and fabric. This panel was inserted between two pieces of woven linen fabric, which resulted in a hat that when you put it on, you tied it on and it actually stretched and adjusted to shape and was very, very comfortable. There's some needle lace along the front as well of the cap, which the people who've recreated it so far have said it's really, really necessary, otherwise it just slides off. They originally thought that this was a bra, but then they, through experimentation, tested it and determined that it was not a bra, and the only thing they could think of was headwear, especially once they started finding images in artwork that showed lace panels within within headwear. The article that goes along with this, which is called Enigmatic Beauty, the Lengberg Headwear, that article has information about a whole bunch of other artworks that show lace panels or lace caps within Europe largely. These are, you notice we went through really early period, and then we have really, really early period stuff, and then we've got very, very little once we're getting to later period. You know, once we hit about 900, we've got very, very little left. These are some of the few silk Sprang pieces that I've actually seen. This, the first large piece is in the UK. It's not in the UK at the moment. I believe it's at the Met, but it's from the UK. They believe it was an altar cloth. This is silk. Everything else I've seen so far isn't silk, and most of what I've seen that is silk is out of period. But the second one is from Milan in Italy, and I think it's a cap because we can see the shaping, they're inserting more and more and more holes, which is allowing it to flare out and to become larger. But this is the one that I created that thing from, that I showed right at the beginning, the red motif. And that's the quality of the image, and I can't get a better one, and I haven't heard back from them yet. So that's the in-period stuff. The sort of common elements that we're seeing throughout is that within Europe, most of it's single colour, most of it's lace work or netting. Most of it's just interlinking. We don't see a lot of, if any, of intertwining, and we see a very small amount of interlacing or even changing back between S and Z. Most of it's in wool and linen. There's a very small amount in silk, and most of those are out of period. The items that we do find are often fine or luxury examples with a lot of detail. And the earliest pieces that we find are wool and network. Throughout Egypt, we largely see colour work. They also do some lace work. We see a larger variety of techniques there. but they're still mostly smaller items, caps, bags, etc. And the network pieces are generally made in single color and linen. And the more dense fabrics that they create are generally wool and lots of color, with the focus on red with accents of green, yellow, and blue. They do a lot of S and Z twist patterning throughout. In Peru, we see the greatest variety of styles, the most expert technique, and the largest items. You could do pretty much anything that you wanted to do if you were doing it from Peru. The biggest common elements that you'd need to consider would be the types of motifs, like the shapes you use, and the colors. But other than that, you could pretty much go nuts. Most intertwining is only found in the Peruvian examples. So broadly, simple network you could do anywhere, anytime, for anything. You could attach a band to it, you could put a cord through it, you could tie it on, you could have it just covering the bottom of your hair, you could have it covering your whole head, or you could just have it covering your head and not covering the hair. However you wanted to go, as long as it fit within your era for the styles that they were using. Then what else? For Sprang lace, you really want to consider the motifs that you're using, because you could use something that really wasn't seen and sort of stands out as a bit different if you're wanting to be period accurate. The fiber types we see are cotton, linen, wool, and a small amount of silk. Predominantly wool, because wool dyes easily. Again, all of the threads are warped at once, so if you need to shape things, it needs to be worked by adjusting the patterning or the techniques. This is the last official slide, and then we're at question time, which is, these are some artworks later that we see. This first one is actually not an artwork, it's a piece from the Osberg ship, and this is referred to as a vertical loom. But because as you work Sprang, because you're working across, it gets tighter and you need to reduce the tension on it so that you can continue working it, which means you need your frame to be able to get shorter. With this one, we can see the holes in it that mean that you can actually start with a much larger size and then slowly make it smaller as needed so that you can maintain that appropriate tension. So this is not definitely Sprang, but it could quite possibly have been a Sprang loom. In the 14th century in Germany, we have this stained glass window from Esslingen. And because we can see some patterning at the top and the bottom, and even the center line, it seems quite clear that this would be a Sprang loom. Then over here, this is a 16th century engraving, where we can see there is definitely the patterning at the top and the bottom with the unworked threads in the middle. And she's pulling the threads that are closest to her quite a way away from the main frame, which is absolutely what I do. But this is just referred to as a loom, and another one of those challenges of not being able to figure out whether it's Sprang or something else. And then we have more questions, and I'll just make you all big so I can see you.
There's a question in chat. What's the origin of the name Sprang?
So I didn't go into it very effectively because there were just so many names. The original, like the name Sprang, we have co-opted. It was originally a Danish word for Sprang with a accent on the A. We basically, in English speaking countries, have removed the accent because most people don't know what to do with them, and have referred to it as Sprang. Some people have said it should be pronounced very differently because of the accent. The original, to my knowledge, the original person who started calling it Sprang to try and unite it a bit was Peter Collingwood, who wrote I suppose the Bible of Sprang. It is the most comprehensive book that has ever been created on Sprang in English. It is definitely the biggest book that's ever been created on Sprang that I'm aware of, but there are some quite comprehensive other language books, but I haven't translated all of them yet. It's a pretty slow process. But Peter Collingwood is the main person who co-opted it from the Danish and Danish and Norwegian word for Sprang. Just scroll down and see if anybody else is any more in.
Yeah, loads of information in chat. So be sure you save off your chat before you switch out of the session.
How do you do that? I'm very new to hosting, and also I've not tried to save a chat before.
So if you're on a laptop or a device, up top of chat, there are 3 little dots.
Mm-hmm.
If you
the more
click that and you click save chat.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
It'll save your chat for you. It's going to put it in a Zoom folder, so you'll have to go look around for it. But it'll just save it for you. With us being in this room, it may behoove you to go and rename the file. So you don't overwrite it later on.
Absolutely. Now, anybody who wanted to stay around, we do still have some out of period examples that can show you some of the stuff that has stayed in existence, to give you some different ideas of what you can do with Sprang.
Excuse me, I just asked a question in the chat.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was late asking the question. So you showed the Langberg cap, and you said that it was originally thought to be a bra, but now they've rethought that. So is that the same as the Langberg bra, or are these 2 different items? Because I've heard the Langberg bra also has an inset of Sprang.
So I haven't, since I sort of delved into all of this, I haven't actually gone back to look at the Langberg bra itself. But this,
I can answer this one.
The cap is definitely a different piece. Yes, Sigrid, you said you could answer that one?
Yeah, I can answer that one.
Wonderful.
There were several pieces found in Lundberg that were actually thought to be bras. The one that's classified as the Lundberg bra is a long line bra with the 2 half cups put in it, and the possibility of a little bit of braiding and or sprang in between the 2 cups. This one was thought to be more of like a sports bra originally, and they, when trying to make that actually fit a human body, realized it doesn't fit that way. But there were originally 4 that were thought to be bras. So, but when people talk about the Lundberg bra, they're really talking about the long line one that laces up the side and has the 2-part cups.
Great, thank you so much.
That's the one that we think has a skirt attached as well to hold down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Also, by the way, if you want to talk to anyone about Lundberg, Suna is a laurel in Oregon. I can't remember what the kingdom is called, but she's a sinister sewist.
Oh, Suna? Yes.
Yeah, and she actually did some of the research on it, so you can ask her personally if you have questions about that stuff.
That's Rachel Case.
Rachel Case?
Yeah. You'll see her name in the article as Rachel Case, but yes.
Yeah, because it was
she's now doing Bronze Age.
Does anybody else have any questions, or I can have a flick through these out of period ones if you'd like?
Please flip.
Pardon?
Please flip.
Sure. Come on. Fun stuff. So these are theorized. We are absolutely not certain about this, but they look cool. This is the Skydian Archer recreation from the Althea Temple in Greece. This original sculpture is from around 490 BC, and they did spectrographic analysis on the original pieces that are, of course, white, to figure out how they were originally painted, and this is what they came up with. And some people have thought that this might have been body paint, but when you have a look at the wrist here, you can see that there's a definite stepping down that makes it quite clear this was definitely a garment. And you can see that at different parts of it, the patterns are actually stretched out more or less, indicating that this is stretchy, and the fact that these are horse archers, you know, you need something stretchy. These can be created in Sprang. Dagmar Drinkler and Carol James have been working on a number of different examples, and so far they have not found a shape that they can't make that is in these. because these largely work with diagonal lines, that's really easy for Sprang, whereas in most traditional weaving, that's much harder to create. And so there are some really good articles out there about tight-fitting clothes in ancient Greece, and it's well worth having a look into those. And these are the ones where you see the colours completely disappear. They're double cloth because they're actually completely hidden underneath each other. And then click across. Oh, did I go too fast? No. These are some German bonnets. Carol James has done a really, really good article on this, quite in depth, discussing these. Now, she was asked to consider, if these caps were Sprang, how would you create them? She's not saying they are, but she's come up with her ideas of how they would have been created if they had been created in Sprang. They are all from Germany. They are all 16th century. They are all pretty cool. And if you're wondering why I've talked about Carol James a lot, firstly, there's not a lot of people out there with lots of information out there. She has a lot. She also provides a lot of her information free of access to people. She does do subscriptions and things, but she also provides a lot of information. And on the bibliography, if you decide to get that, it will have links to some of her free worksheets for you. But these show a lot of different techniques within this one. Then this is from Ukraine, sort of 19th century-ish. And they made two caps at once where they worked as normal, but you notice that one's taller than the rest, like part of it's taller than the rest. When they got towards the center, they were cut off. It was secured. These edges were joined to each other, and these edges were joined to each other to make a shaped cap. They were then put into a band, and then you made two caps at once. So kind of convenient and easy to do. This is some of the this is one of the officer sashes that people quite often see and are like, oh, that's Sprang. Yeah. So this is the Sprang one. These were made out of silk. These were huge. These were sort of 9 feet long and up to 4 feet wide. They are actually large enough and strong enough to carry somebody off the battlefield. And that's fairly amazing to me. Coming through to the 19th and 20th century, as you see, we're going more into the simple things as a general thing. We've got a waistband that would have been put through a pair of pants on either side. One is from Pakistan, one is from India. The cloth in the middle here is from Mexico. And the one down the bottom, which is actually a purse, it seems a bit bizarre, but there's a slit in the back of it. And so you can hang it over your belt. And this is from Turkey. Then into the 21st century, another Carol James example, we can do all sorts of things with Sprang. We can create modern items if we want to. There are a lot of interesting things we can do when you combine Sprang knowledge and sewing knowledge. There's a whole lot of stuff you can do. And then from here, I will just make this. I can see everybody again because it keeps hiding away from me. And double check through. Sorry, I'm just looking through to see that I haven't missed anything else. There. Okay, so that's pretty much everything that I have. If anybody has any further questions, I believe we've got a few minutes before we do need to get out, so the next person has a chance to get in and get sorted out. But if anybody wants to ask anything, otherwise, please do email me if you have questions and let me know what you think. And if you have feedback, positive or negative, but I prefer positive. Sigrid, you have a question?
I have some feedback and a question.
Yep.
So A, lovely class, beautifully done. B, do you have access to the textiles from the Nile Valley conference proceedings?
Not all of them. I have a couple of individual articles from them, but I don't have full access.
Okay, well, just see if you find that yourself bumping into and you need one, I have the first 10 volumes. because I went to the conference, not last time it happened, but the time before that. And they had a lovely sale on all 10 of them. The trick was getting them.
That's fairly amazing. Would you be able to send me an email or send me a message with your email?
Sure.
Thank you. I didn't ask anybody to put their emails in the chat because I didn't want you to feel that you had to share an email publicly if you weren't comfortable to do so. That's why I've given everybody my email. It also means if you email me, I won't forget to email you. Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. There's the very last, I actually forgot about that. I do have one more slide that I added in last night. Because of course I added it in last night. And a lot of people will have missed this already, but there's been a lot of people that have really, really helped me throughout this whole process. Especially Mistresses Rahis de Fairhurst and Joa Tigra de Argentona for their unconditional support, help, advice, knowledge, patience, etc. Carol James, Sharon Wickman, and the Sprang chat groups for their expertise and knowledge, including all of the troubleshooting of Sprang and fibre crafts and all that sort of stuff. Anybody who listened to me just babbling on about Sprang. And most importantly, because they're closest to me, my family, especially my husband and kids, for listening to me talk about it all of the time, for putting up with the frustration while I learned, and then the shouting, sometimes happy and sometimes not so much happy when I worked things out. And yes, all of the things, them waiting for me and waiting, children who are bouncing off the walls, waiting for me to finish a row so that I don't have to redo the row. And so, yeah, thank you all for coming and the feedback. And I hope you had fun and I hope you learned some new stuff. And I know there was a lot. So thank you.